Number 10. Donald Trump. Former President Donald Trump came to fame as a bash New York real estate developer with an outrageous hairstyle, high-profile romantic exploits, and a gift for self-promotion. Trump inherited the family business from his father, Fred Trump, a successful New York City builder and landlord. 6 Trump-owned businesses filed Chapter 11 bankruptcy in the late 1990s and 2000s. 5 were gaming enterprises, including the famed Trump Taj Mahal and its parent company, Trump Hotels and Casinos Resorts. Most occurred during or following the major real estate downturns of the early 1990s and middle to late 2000s. The first bankruptcy filed in 1991 was arguably the most devastating for Trump's lifestyle. Trump funded the $1 billion Trump Taj Mahal with loads of high-interest debt. Within a year of opening, the property was more than $3 billion in the hole, and Trump was personally on the hook for $900 million. Trump Hotels and Casinos Resorts was more than $1.8 billion in debt when it first filed for Chapter 11 in 2004. So overall, to summarize, he's broke and a really stupid person. Number 9. William McKinley. Before he was president, William McKinley was so broke he almost quit politics completely. In 1891, after William McKinley had been elected governor of Ohio, a major financial institution came after him for approximately $130,000. A few years prior, McKinley had helped Robert Walker, a businessman and former associate, launch a business by co-signing a loan. The Panic of 1893 resulted in the demise of Walker's business, and little did McKinley know that Walker had taken advantage of his trusting nature and tricked him into assuming 100% responsibility of the loan. Walker went bankrupt and left the newly elected governor with the bill from the bank. McKinley was then going to resign as governor in order to go back to practicing law, where he could make more money. However, 2 of his political supporters, Mark Hanna and H.H. Colsatt, saw presidential potential in McKinley and raised the funds required to bail McKinley out. President William McKinley's financial burden serves as a constant reminder. Be careful when co-signing and try to always have super rich friends who can bail you out of a $100,000 jam. Number 8. George Washington. In the late 1760s, George Washington went completely broke when his tobacco farm flopped. Washington went into business with a British merchant named Robert Carey. Washington grew the tobacco and Carey distributed it. As you can probably guess, it did not go so well. Washington believed that Carey was selling his tobacco for too cheap and mismanaging his supplies. Within a few years of business, Washington's farm began to hemorrhage money. But Carey agreed to finance the whole endeavor on credit until Washington's business improved. Washington ultimately fell into so much debt that he began feeling like a prisoner. By 1773, Carey and Washington had an unsalvageable business relationship. The passing of Washington's daughter, along with the decision to diversify his crops, left Washington with just enough money to settle his debt. By 1774, he was able to settle his debt with Carey and sever all business ties with him. George Washington remained so poor that in order to go to Philadelphia to preside over the Constitutional Convention, he had to borrow money from George Mason. Number 7. Harry Truman. Harry S. Truman went broke well before he became president due to a failed business venture. In 1921, future President Truman and his business partner Eddie Jacobson opened a haberdashery called Truman and Jacobson Haberdashery. Business was initially great, as Truman and Jacobson were both veterans, and brought that military-grade work ethic into their shop. Unfortunately, no amount of hard work could have prepared the duo for the recession following the Great Depression, and in 1921 their business failed, leaving them both broke and nearly bankrupt. Truman refused to file for bankruptcy and insisted he back all his debts. He used connections made from his shop to land other jobs. He eventually paid off his debt in the 1930s. However, that wasn't the last of Truman's financial issues. In 1954, when Truman finished serving his second term as president, he had no savings, support, or income besides a $112 per month pension from the Army. Truman had lived without a significant source of income until 1958, when Eisenhower enacted the Former President's Act in 1958, which provided Truman with a presidential pension. Presidential historians often regard Truman as one of the least wealthy presidents in modern history. Number 6. Bill Clinton. When President Bill Clinton left office in 2001, he was burdened by major legal bills stemming from his infidelity scandal, impeachment trial, and action to suspend his law license. During his presidency, Clinton had to hire a group of defense attorneys and racked up to $16 million in debt. But in just his first year out of the White House, Clinton earned nearly $14 million, giving 57 speeches, and he managed to achieve solvency within 3 years. Number 5. Ulysses S. Grant. In the 1880s, Ulysses S. Grant lost practically every dollar he had to a Ponzi scheme. After losing his bid for re-election, Grant moved to New York City to go into business with Grant and Ward, an investment firm run by his son, Ulysses S. Grant Jr., and his business partner Ferdinand Ward. Ward was described as a young, charming people pleaser with a talent for persuading investors to give up their money. Initially, Grant and Ward was a huge success. However, Grant Sr. soon discovered that Ward was taking investor money and using it to fund his own lavish lifestyle. In May 1884, Grant and Ward had failed, leaving the Civil War hero and former president absolutely broke. Desperate for money, Grant eventually turned to writing as a source of income. Unfortunately, in 1884, he was diagnosed with throat cancer due to years of smoking. Fearful he would leave his family completely broke, Grant immediately began furiously writing his autobiography. In 1885, Grant then passed almost immediately after finishing his memoirs. Though he never lived to see it, the book was successful enough to ensure his family's financial welfare. Number 4. James Monroe. Due to an extensive career in public positions that paid poorly and demanded expenses for entertainment and protocol, James Monroe was crushed with financial obligations when he left the White House after his second term. For the next several years, he spent time pursuing the government for thousands of dollars due to him for past services. Eventually, the government did pay him a portion of the funds he wanted, and Monroe was able to leave a sizable inheritance for his family when he passed in 1831. On July 4th, the third of 5 founding father presidents to do so. Number 3. Abraham Lincoln. In 1832, several years before he became president, Abraham Lincoln opened a business with a friend, but the business was unsuccessful and sank into the red. When the partner passed, Lincoln decided to bear the brunt of the debt rather than saddle his friend's grieving family with it. Creditors went after Lincoln in court, and the sheriff took his only remaining assets, his horse and some surveying gear. He was then efficiently bankrupt before today's bankruptcy laws were on the books. Number 2. James Garfield. James Garfield was probably the poorest man ever to become president. He was born in a log cabin, and his father passed when the future president was still a toddler. The family was then plunged into poverty. Garfield worked on canal boats and as a janitor and a carpenter to pay the bills while reading and studying his own before getting into college. He would become a professor, a lawyer, a minister, a Civil War hero, and finally president of the United States. Though he achieved the highest office in the land, Garfield still had very little money to his name when his life was cut short by an assassin's bullet in 1881. Number 1. Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson spent his life in perpetual debt, always borrowing money with the hopes of impressing his peers with expensive clothing, fine wines, and his house. Jefferson borrowed money from everyone, even one of his slaves. Can you believe the nerve this guy had? Other factors, however, definitely contributed to Jefferson's debt problem. For starters, his agricultural business ventures continued to drain him of money. He also inherited debt from his father-in-law's passing and a loan he co-signed. Things progressively got worse for Jefferson. He eventually took on new loans just to pay the interest on old loans. In 1826, Jefferson petitioned the Virginia legislature to sponsor a lottery for his belongings. While the legislature eventually approved this, it only raised a fraction of the money Jefferson needed. On July 4th, 1826, Jefferson had then passed with over $100,000 in debt.
Number 10. Donald Trump. The rare case of a celebrity running for president and actually becoming the president. Trump's celebrity career dates all the way back to 1980. Trump originally appeared on a talk show to talk about real estate. He published a book in 1987 called The Art of the Deal, which helped his public image. Later in life, Trump actually was bankrupt a few times over his company. Donald Trump decided to run for president in the 2016 election and actually garnered enough votes to become the 45th president of the United States. Number 9. Kanye West. Kanye has always been the center of attention for at least the last 5 years, with his many controversies being the most odd things you could read in a headline, like when did Ye run for president? Well, in 2016, Kanye was so broke that he asked Mark Zuckerberg for an investment of $1 billion into his ideas. His finances eventually returned to him through his Yeezy brand, and now that he had enough money for a campaign and Mark Zuckerberg wouldn't listen to his ideas, he decided to run for president in 2020. He failed, but received 70,000 votes from 12 states. He has since said some very anti-Semitic things, being dropped by Balenciaga and Adidas, and has said he will run again in 2024. Number 8. Roseanne Barr. In 2012, comedian Roseanne Barr decided to run for president of the United States, highlighting issues like environmental protection and the legalization of a smoky substance. She ultimately came in 6th. Roseanne caught herself in the middle of a controversy which got her cancelled. The comedian tweeted a racist comment in 2018 directed at one of President Obama's aides. The consequences for Barr were swift. ABC Entertainment president Channing Dungey denounced the star's words and announced that the network would no longer be a platform for the show. Robert Iger tweeted this about the situation. From Channing Dungey, president of ABC Entertainment, Roseanne's Twitter statement is abhorrent, repugnant, and inconsistent with our values, and we have decided to cancel her show. There was only one thing to do here, and that was the right thing. I agree with him. It's probably best she didn't win the presidency. Number 7. Wyclef Jean. The Fugees member was inspired to action by the earthquake in Haiti in 2010. The Haitian-born musician, songwriter, and politician attempted to run for the Haitian presidency, but his run was cut short rather quickly, as he didn't have the residency required to run. Over the years, Wyclef has faced a number of financial challenges. In mid-2012, the IRS and state authorities filed a $2.9 million claim against the singer for unpaid taxes. Wyclef has also been sued by a handful of creditors who claimed he never paid for services rendered. These services include $133,000 to a New York law firm called Schuchat, Arrow, Haffer, Weber, and Herbsman. The law firm sued Wyclef and was awarded a $100,000 judgment. Number 6. Manny Pacquiao. The 2022 presidential campaign of Manny Pacquiao formally began on October 1st, 2021, when Manny Pacquiao filed his candidacy for the 2022 Philippine presidential election. He was a senator of the Philippines from June 30th, 2016 to June 30th, 2022, and was previously a member of the House of Representatives, representing the Sarangani Lone District. Pacquiao is affiliated with PDP Laban, the same party as incumbent Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte. He has been the acting president of PDP Laban since 2020, but the following year, infighting within the party caused the party to split to two factions, one led by party president Alfonso Cusi, who is loyal to Duterte, and another faction which sides with Pacquiao. The faction which regards Pacquiao as still party president nominated him as PDP Laban's presidential candidate on September 19th, 2021. Manny went on to lose the presidency. At number 5, Ronald Reagan. Did you know Ronald Reagan was a movie star before his presidency? That's right. Reagan starred in many films over the years, usually 2 movies a year actually, because he would get a tax break if he performed in 2 films a year. That's pretty smart. He also came from humble beginnings. He was born in a small apartment and grew into a young man quickly. At 17, he began work as a lifeguard. He worked as a lifeguard for 6 summers, where he managed to save 77 people from drowning. Reagan really had a glow up from lifeguard to president. I didn't even think you could do that. Number 4, Jesse Ventura. Jesse Ventura was an American wrestler before his political run. Ventura wrestled for more than a decade and appeared in several anti-steroid educational campaigns following his retirement and admitted steroid use. He retired from wrestling in the ring after suffering from blood clots. After a brief stint as an actor, Ventura's post-wrestling career also turned political, and he won his first campaign to be the mayor of Brooklyn Park, Minnesota, serving from 1991 to 1995. 3 years later, he ran for governor of Minnesota on the Reform Party ticket, defeating St. Paul's mayor and the state's attorney general in the election. Number 3, Jerry Springer. Jerry Springer is an English-born American television presenter who has a net worth of $60 million. Without a doubt, Jerry Springer is most widely recognized as the host of the tabloid talk show, The Jerry Springer Show, which began as a political commentary program in 1991, but shifted its focus to tabloid news in the mid-90s to gain better ratings. Jerry Springer took 2 tries at running for office. In 1970, he ran for Congress and lost, but in 1977, he won the Cincinnati mayoral seat and served until 1978. Although he has $60 million right now, he used to be as broke as anyone else. Number 2, Dianne Neal. Dianne Neal ran for election to the US House to represent New York's 19th congressional district. She lost in the general election on November 6, 2018. In August 2018, the New York State Board of Elections rejected 1,852 of the 4,181 signatures submitted by Neal's campaign to place her on the general election ballot. The campaign needed to submit at least 3,500 valid signatures, and Neal had just 2,329 valid signatures after the rejections. Neal's campaign appealed to the state Supreme Court, and the court ruled in favor of her campaign on September 17, 2018. Number 1, Dr. Oz. The medical show host turned to politics and ran for Senate in Pennsylvania. On November 30th, 2021, Oz announced his candidacy for the Republican nomination for the United States Senate seat in Pennsylvania in 2022. After Oz announced his candidacy, a number of TV stations in Philadelphia, New York City, and Cleveland said that they would remove his show from the air, compelled by the FCC's equal time rule that provides any equivalent airtime to any opposing political candidates who request it. In his campaign, he called for immunologist Anthony Fauci, the chief medical advisor to the president, to be fired, and also opposed vaccine requirements. What a weird fella. His products were sketchy enough, and now he doesn't believe in vaccines? Aw, shucks.
Truett Cathy under fire by LGBTQ+ activists in 2012. While Chick-fil-A is perhaps best known for its crispy chicken sandwiches, the company is also known for its controversies surrounding LGBTQ+ rights. Chick-fil-A and its president Dan Cathy, whose current net worth is $5.2 billion, were scandalized after the company revealed its support for Christian organizations, such as Fellowship of Christian Athletes, the Salvation Army, and the Paul Anderson Youth Home, which have all held
held anti-gay beliefs over the years. In 2012, Kathy gave an interview to the Baptist Press in which he said he believed in the quote, biblical definition of the family unit. That is, that marriage should only be between a man and a woman. Backlash ensued, and while Kathy claimed it was his own personal religious belief and that the company did not have any anti-gay agenda, activists went as far as to boycott the chain entirely. The chain has since stopped donating to these organizations, choosing instead to donate to education, homelessness, and hunger. Number 9, Jack Ma's Ant Group IPO shelved in a power grab. China's financial regulators hit pause in November 2020 on fintech company Ant Group's $35 billion IPO on the Hong Kong and Shanghai stock exchanges, just days before the company was slated to go public in the world's largest public offering. Jack, co-founder and chairman of Chinese e-commerce giant Alibaba, is the largest individual shareholder in Ant Group, an arm of Alibaba that enables online payments and makes consumer loans. The Shanghai Stock Exchange cited significant change to the regulatory environment as the reason for halting the IPO, but offered few additional details, according to Bloomberg. About a week prior to the announcement during a conference in Shanghai, Jack blamed China's financial regulations for stifling innovation. The Wall Street Journal reported that Chinese President Xi Jinping personally killed the IPO in retaliation for Jack's criticism. In late December, Chinese regulators announced an antitrust investigation into Alibaba and recommended Ant Group's self-implement financial regulations amid a larger desire in Beijing to limit technology firms' growth and power. Number 8, Robert F. Smith's massive tax evasion. Smith, a private equity CEO and the wealthiest black man in America who notably paid off student loans for the entire graduating class of Morehouse College in 2019, lost the respect of many when he confessed in October 2020 to an illegal scheme to conceal income and avoid taxes, and paid a hefty fine to settle the matter. That month, federal officials disclosed that Smith admitted to parking $200 million in offshore accounts and criminally evaded paying taxes on it for 15 years from 2000 through 2015. Smith entered into a non-prosecution agreement with the Department of Justice and agreed to pay $139 million in penalties to the IRS, which is the largest tax fine ever. He also agreed to help the IRS reel in Texas-based billionaire Robert Brockman, Smith's former client at Goldman Sachs, and reportedly the initial investor in its Vista Equity private equity firm. Brockman was charged in October 2020 with hiding $2 billion from tax officials in offshore accounts, perhaps the largest tax evasion scheme in history. When asked about the tax matter at a New York Times online deal book conference in mid-November, Smith referred to it as a mistake, saying, "A big part of life is that you make mistakes. You have to in some way clarify them, clear them up, and get beyond them." In late November, Smith's co-founder and close friend Brian Seth told Forbes he was leaving Vista Equity, ending the partnership the two men formed in 2000. Number 7, Ike Batista lost the majority of his wealth. In 2012, Batista was worth an estimated $30 billion, making him the 7th richest man in the world. But when Batista's oil company failed to meet demands and Brazil's economy slid into a decline, the billionaire filed for bankruptcy in 2013. After authorities began investigating why Brazil's top companies had declined so quickly, they charged Batista with money laundering and corruption in January 2017. In July 2018, he was sentenced to 30 years in prison for bribing former Rio de Janeiro Governor Sergio Cabral. Number 6, Leon Black's personal financial ties to Jeffrey. In October 2020, a New York Times report revealed that Black, the billionaire founder of private equity and investing firm Apollo Management, paid disgraced financier Jeffrey about $50 million for personal financial advice between 2012 and 2017. The time period is notable. It means Black engaged in Jeffrey's services long after he was convicted in 2008 of an underage intimacy charge in Florida, and a plea deal worked out between him and U.S. attorneys that enabled Jeff to serve what many believe was a light prison sentence in a county jail. Black quickly expressed regret for his association with Jeffrey since his 2019 arrest, said that Jeffrey never did business with Apollo, and claimed he was unaware of Jeff's alleged intimacy ring of underage girls. Jeff then passed by taking his own life in Manhattan jail in August 2019 while awaiting trial. Number 5, Jacqueline Mars struck another vehicle, taking a life. Jacqueline Mars, the heiress to the Mars candy fortune and company co-founder, was involved in a 2013 car accident that took the life of a woman and an unborn child. The Washington Post reported that, according to authorities, Mars had told a witness at the scene of the accident that she had fallen asleep while driving. Victims in the accident were identified as 86-year-old grandmother named Irene, who was sitting in the backseat, and the unborn child of Ashley Acker Baxley, the driver of the Chrysler minivan struck by Mars's Porsche SUV. 5 other passengers were later treated at the hospital. At the time, Mars was the second richest woman in the US with a net worth of $20.5 billion. Her net worth currently sits at $30.2 billion. She pleaded guilty to a misdemeanor reckless driving charge, resulting in a 6-month suspension of her driver's license and paid a $2,500 fine. The Acker family said that they never wished for Mars to spend time behind bars for the accident. "We have only forgiveness in our hearts for her," Sharon Acker, Ashley's mother, said in a court statement. "My husband and I would like to say thank you to Mrs. Mars for her kindness thus far and hope in time that she she will too find peace. Number 4, Luckin Coffee's fabricated revenues. With the goal of growing bigger than Starbucks in China, Luckin Coffee listed its shares on the Nasdaq in May 2019 and proceeded to wow investors with its growing revenues. The Chinese coffee chain attempted to grab market share by offering discounts such as buy one get two free deals. Shares soared, and in early March, Luckin Coffee CEO Jenny was briefly a billionaire alongside Luckin's founder and chairman Charles Liu. In April, the company announced an internal probe found at Luckin's chief operating officer, Jean Liu, along with several subordinates, had faked $310 million in transactions. By the end of April, Luckin chairman Liu was $1 billion poorer. As the stock fell further, his net worth dropped to a current estimated $800 million. On December 16, 2020, Luckin Coffee agreed to pay $180 million to the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission as a result of its investigation into the fabricated revenues. The company did not admit or deny the allegations made by the SCE, and no individuals were charged in the matter. Number 3, Elizabeth Holmes fell from grace after it emerged that her medical startup wasn't everything it claimed to be. Elizabeth Holmes was once lauded as a star on the rise in Silicon Valley. Her blood testing startup, Theranos, gained attention in the early 2000s as an exciting investment opportunity promising to revolutionize the way patients are tested and treated for various diseases and illnesses. By the end of 2004, the company had raised roughly $6 million from private investors, some of whom had personal connections to Holmes. By 2015, she topped Forbes' list of America's self-made women with a net worth of $4.5 billion. However, after concerns about the validity of Theranos technology was raised to the FDA, things began to turn sour for the rising company. By November 2015, Theranos had lost its two major partnerships with Safeway and Walgreens. In 2016, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services concluded Theranos testing might pose a safety risk to patients. After multiple lawsuits, layoffs, and a federal allegation that Holmes had conducted massive fraud, Theranos closed its doors in September 2018, narrowly avoiding bankruptcy. Holmes and her partner Sonny Baldwin were charged with a wire fraud of the Department of Justice, and the trial was set to begin in August 2020. They have both since pleaded not guilty, and on Forbes' list, Holmes' personal net worth is at $0. Number 2, President Trump's tax bombshell. The New York Times achieved in September 2020 what was starting to seem impossible. They got hold of Donald Trump's tax returns, and what they found was rough. Most outrageous perhaps was the revelation that in 2016 and 2017, the billionaire paid just $750 in federal taxes. And for almost 2 decades before that, Trump paid nothing in federal taxes due to massive loans racked up by his businesses. At the time, the Trump Organization claimed most of the Times facts were inaccurate, and that Trump had paid millions in personal taxes to the federal government, but I think we all know that's not true. Now coming in at number 1, Markus Baron, Wirecard and the missing $2 billion. The CEO of German payments firm Wirecard was a billionaire in 2019, but not on March 18th when Forbes finalized the 2020 list of the world's billionaires. In June 2019, news broke that Wirecard could not account for $2 billion of funds. Markus soon resigned as CEO as the accounting scandal struck a blow to the company's stock. Then just a bit later in June the same year, he was arrested and charged with allegedly inflating Wirecard's sales and balance sheet with fake transactions to improve its profile with investors. He denies any wrongdoing and was being held in a prison while Munich prosecutors completed their investigation. The company eventually admitted that the missing $2 billion was likely money that it never had. Wirecard shares took a beating, falling nearly 90% the week after the funds were reported missing. The 7% stake in Wirecard, had he held on to it, would have been worth just $4 million as of late December 2020. And at number 10 with the Mars family. When you hear the word Mars, one of two things probably come to mind. One being the planet Mars, and 2 being the candy Mars bar. Well, that's what I'm talking about. Some family members work at the company and serve on the board of directors. Mars was founded in 1911 when Frank Mars started selling candy out of his kitchen in Tacoma, Washington. Frank's son, Forrest Sr., joined the company in 1929 and helped his father develop the malt-flavored nougat that became the basis of the Milky Way. A multi-generational family business that is widely popular today, the company is better known for making M&Ms than for its Mars bar now. In 2017, the world's largest candy company diversed with the purchase of VCA, which is a pet care company, for $9.1 billion. Siblings Jacqueline and John Mars, whose grandfather Frank Mars founded the company, each has a net worth of $31.7 billion and are tied for number 41 on Forbes' list of billionaires. The company is now being run by some of their children, the 4th generation of Mars family members. Now coming in at number 9, the Gallo family. More than a dozen descendants of brothers Ernest and Julio Gallo inherited the California winery they founded in 1933. E&J Gallo Winery, the largest winemaker in the world, pulled in an estimated $5 billion in revenue in 2019. The Gallo family fortune is derived from a few avenues. The brothers founded the world's largest winemakery in Modesto, California. Their other brother Joseph assisted with the family business until he opened his first dairy company and sold cheese as Joseph Gallo Cheese. Ernest and Julio even won a bitter lawsuit in 1992 against their brother Joseph over his use of the Gallo name for his cheese business. His children now run Joseph Farms, while the descendants of Ernest and Julio run E&J Gallo Winery, which generates estimated annual revenues of $3.8 billion. The company, however, sells more than wine these days, having added liquor to the list as well, with the whole family's net worth being around $10.7 billion and sitting on 15,000 acres in the Central Valley of California. Number 8. Johnson family. So based on the title, I'm sure you can guess which one this is about, but if not, maybe this will jog your memory.
We work hard, so you don't have to.
All over the bathroom.
SC Johnson, a family company.
Robert Wood Johnson founded health products Giant Johnson & Johnson in 1886, providing the world with dental floss and first aid kits. His son, Robert Wood Johnson II, was nicknamed the General and took over the family business in 1932, in the process turning it into a global brand. The General and brothers Seward Johnson both passed with enormous fortunes. The General left the bulk of his to the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. The rest went to heirs including Woody Johnson, the New York Jets owner and scandal-plagued ambassador to the UK and the Trump White House. Woody's 2017 federal financial disclosure said that he had $1.7 billion in wealth outside of the Jets. Recent ones are unclear on where those assets stand. The company is one of the largest financial services firms in the world, providing investment services to millions of people. The firm is now run by Johnson's granddaughter, Abigail Johnson, who ranks 75th on the Forbes billionaires list and a net worth of $21.2 billion. Number 7. The Rockefeller family. John D. Rockefeller became America's first billionaire after founding Standard Oil in 1870, which eventually controlled a majority of the country's oil refining. He and his son, John Jr., dedicated themselves to philanthropy, giving away more than $1 billion and establishing the University of Chicago. In 2016, the Rockefeller Family Fund, a family philanthropic entity, made waves when it announced it would divest from all fossil fuel investments. John's grandson, David, was the oldest living billionaire at the age of 101 before his passing in 2017. His will designated most of his wealth for charity. The family's fortune is now split among 174 members, and in total, the family's net worth is $11 billion. Number 6. The Butt family. Florence Butt founded H-E-B grocery store in Texas in 1905 when Florence Butt opened a small grocery store with just $60. Her son Howard expanded throughout the state when he took over the company in the 1920s, renaming it H.E. Butt Grocery Company in 1928. Howard's son Charles got his start as a bag boy at age 8 in the 1940s and succeeded his father as CEO in 1971. His son Charles is a majority shareholder and currently runs the company, which has 400 stores in Texas and Mexico and generates $25 billion in annual sales. Halfway at number 5. The Cathy family. Samuel Truett Cathy founded the famous fast food chain Chick-fil-A in 1967. Since then, the family-owned business has remained in the hands of second and third generation family members. Truett's sons Dan Cathy and Don Cathy run the company as CEO and executive vice president. Dan Cathy grew up doing odd jobs in his father's restaurants, including scraping chewing gum from table bottoms with a butter knife. They each have reported net worth of $5.5 billion according to the Forbes 100. When Dan became CEO of Chick-fil-A in 2012, it sparked a nationwide protest that he made anti-same-sex marriage remarks. Number 4. The Mellon family. The Mellon family fortune originated when Thomas Mellon invested in coal and real estate in the 1860s. He was so successful he used the investment to become a judge and invested his income in real estate and later banking. He then left his fortune to his children to grow. Between his direct descendants and future generations, they did just that, investing in companies that later became Alcoa and Gulf Oil, now Chevron, and owning companies in media and the railroad industry. Matthew Mellon was the face of the family until his untimely passing in April 2018. The family now has a net worth of $11.5 billion. Number 3. The Duncan family. Dan L. Duncan founded gas and oil company Enterprise Products Partners in 1968 with just $10,000. Before striking gold in pipelines, Dan grew up poor in rural Texas and was raised by his grandmother after losing his mother at age 7. After he passed away in 2010, the company remained under family control and his 4 children inherited a $10 billion estate. The family fortune has since more than doubled with a net worth now of around $24.8 billion. Miranda is now the only one of Dan's children with a role in the company, serving as chairman of the board since 2013. Now coming in at number 2, the Koch family. Fred C. Koch started America's largest private company, Koch Industries, when he co-founded the Wood River Oil and Refining Company in 1940. His son Charles took over as chairman and CEO after he passed in 1967. 3 other sons, Frederick, David, and William, or Bill, also inherited stakes. A power struggle among the brothers led to the ouster of Frederick and Bill, whose shares were reportedly bought out for nearly $800 million in 1983. Brothers Charles and David Koch expanded their father's oil refining firm in Columagate, Koch Industries, after their other brothers Frederick and William left the business following a failed takeover. Today, Koch Industries generates roughly $100 billion in revenue annually. David Koch, who stepped down from a leadership position in the company in 2018, has pledged to contribute more than $1.2 billion to cancer research, hospitals, education, and cultural institutions through the David H. Koch Charitable Foundation. Both brothers reportedly secretly funded some of the biggest summer movies of 2017, including Wonder Woman. Coming in at number 1, Walton family. family. The Waltons are the richest family in America and, by some measures, the wealthiest in the world. At the top of the value chain in 2022, Alice, Jim, and Rob Walton are each worth around $60 billion and ranked number 16, 18, and 19 on Forbes' billionaire list. Walmart is a retail behemoth, founded by Sam Walton in Arkansas in 1962. Walmart is now the world's largest company by 2021 revenues, with $524 billion and over 2.3 million US associates. If Walmart employees comprise their own city, it would be the third most populated American city. Kinda crazy to believe. The company operates approximately 10,000 retail stores worldwide, with 4,742 stores in the US as of May 2022. That's known for big box stores in rural and suburban America. Walmart is celebrated for its low price products and criticized for its labor practices. The company failed to bring its big box consumer lifestyle to New York City, unlike its competitor Target. Number 10, Ike Batista. In 2012, Batista was worth an estimated $30 billion, making him the 7th richest man in the world. But when Batista's oil company failed to meet demands and Brazil's economy slid into a decline, the billionaire filed for bankruptcy in 2013, after authorities began investigating why Brazil's top companies had declined so quickly. They charged Batista with money laundering and corruption in January 2017. Then in July 2018, he was sentenced to 30 years in prison for bribing former Rio de Janeiro governor Sergio Cabral. Number 9, the Koch brothers. David and Charles, the brothers still with Koch Industries, are among the world's biggest polluters. Bill Koch, who split off from the family company, is a world-class weirdo who devotes himself to things like building a faux western town solely for his amusement and buying a $2 million photo of Billy the Kid. Though not as active in bankrolling GOP polls as his brothers, Bill was a big supporter of fellow 1% jerk Mitt Romney and has found time to fight against America's first offshore wind farm in Massachusetts. As for David and Charles, they have won a permanent spot in the Public Menace Hall of Fame, kicking their fellow human beings in the face with everything from funding climate change denial to strangling democracy. They have striven to reshape America into a Tea Party nightmare and have plenty of money to continue their mission. Number 8, Peter Peterson. Private equity mogul Pete Peterson, who founded the Blackstone Group with Steven Schwarzman, has a very straightforward agenda. He wants to kill Social Security and Medicare, the programs that keep millions of Americans out of poverty. His strategy is to channel gargantuan amounts of money into stoking nonsensical deficit hysteria. His focus on austerity policies, which have proved disastrous around the world, particularly in places like the UK, makes him an economic quack, but one who has found willing ears among fools and villains. Peterson has pushed his messaging into popular culture. He has held high-profile summits, and he has enlisted hordes of wealthy politicians, like Alan Simpson. He is a driving force behind the Fix the Debt campaign, a consortium of corporate bosses and rich individuals who have attempted to bring deficit scaremongering to DC in order to achieve cuts to vital programs and further strip hardworking Americans of their dignity. Number 7, Rupert Murdoch. Murdoch, the Australian media tycoon, has dedicated himself to coercing the public through the misinformation, intolerance, and contempt of ordinary people promoted through his News Corp. Politicians woo him for his cash and the vast influence of his newspapers, magazines, and TV networks, creating a foul nexus of influence that is corrosive to democracy. Be it union busting, race baiting, or monopolistic business practices, Murdoch has been there, done that. He's found himself embroiled in a hacking scandal in which employees of his newspaper were caught doing just about anything, including bribing police and hacking into the phone of an executed schoolgirl to get a story. Murdoch had previously tweeted what he considered a joke about an obese woman who fell through a New York sidewalk, asking if she got too fat from food stamps and welfare. Number 6, Steven Schwarzman. The Blackstone Group's co-founder Steven Schwarzman, described as private equity's designated villain in The New Yorker, is fond of throwing lavish parties for himself, including an infamous $3 million birthday feat in June 2007 at New York City's Park Avenue Armory. The party, which went down in history as a show-stopping chant to bad taste, featured a marching band of a 50-foot silkscreen recreation of Schwarzman-owned $40 billion apartment. Revelers included Bill Clinton and Cardinal Edward Egan, now considered a dark horse for the Pope. A couple of months later, the economy tanked thanks in part to the mismanagement and excess debt of the unregulated private equity firms that have served to weaken the real economy. Schwarzman captured headlines by comparing raising taxes on private equity fat cats like himself to Adolf's invasion of Poland. He's reportedly outraged that persons like himself have been the subject of contempt since the financial crisis. Number 5, Gina Rinehart. If there is a place for those who hate working people, Australian mining mogul
mogul, Gina Reinhardt, occupies the innermost circle. The richest woman in the Asia-Pacific region likes to share her obscene philosophy of wealth, and had once made a case for $2 a day pay. She also instructed poor people to stop being jealous of the rich and to focus on working harder, and drinking and smoking less. She blamed Australia's economic problems on a socialist, anti-business agenda. But of course, Reinhardt, who inherited a $30 billion fortune, has never had a real job. Number 4, True Cathy. While Chick-fil-A is perhaps best known for its crispy chicken sandwiches, the company is also known for its controversy surrounding LGBTQ+ rights. Chick-fil-A and its president Dan Cathy, whose current net worth is $5.2 billion, were scandalized after the company revealed its support for Christian organizations such as Fellowship of Christian Athletes, the Salvation Army, and the Paul Anderson Youth Home, which have all held anti-gay beliefs over the years. In 2012, Cathy gave an interview to the Baptist Press in which he said he believed in the, quote, biblical definition of the family unit. That is, that marriage should only be between a man and a woman. Backlash ensued, and while Cathy claimed it was his own personal religious belief and that the company did not have any anti-gay agenda, activists went as far as to boycott the chain entirely. The chain has since stopped donating to these organizations, choosing instead to donate to education, homeless, and hunger. Number 3, the Walton family. The Walton family is the richest in the US and heirs to the retail juggernaut Walmart. They collectively claim 0.14% of the country's entire wealth. Or to put it another way, they are worth as much as the bottom 41% of all Americans combined. Their legacy is a grotesque business model that depends on pushing down wages and sinking living standards for millions of Americans. Rob is the chairman of the board of directors of the company that pays its full-time hourly employees an average of $12.50 and has a policy of keeping them part-time so they don't even earn that. The Waltons are big-time funders of conservative causes, with special emphasis on undermining public education. Jim Walton, who serves as a chairman for the Walton-owned Arvest Bank, is particularly active in injecting his family's ill-gotten gains into politics. Number 2, Leon Black. In October 2020, a New York Times report revealed that Black, the billionaire founder of private equity and investing firm Apollo Management, paid disgraced financier Jeffrey about $50 million for personal financial advice between 2012 and 2017. The time period is notable. It means Black engaged in Jeffrey's services long after he was convicted in 2008 of an underage intimacy charge in Florida, in a plea deal worked out between him and U.S. attorneys that enabled Jeff to serve that many believe was a light prison sentence in a county jail. Black quickly expressed regret for his association with Jeffrey since his 2019 arrest, said that Jeffrey never did business with Apollo, and claimed he was unaware of Jeff's alleged intimacy ring of underage girls. Number 1, Jacqueline Mars. Jacqueline Mars, the heiress to the Mars candy fortune and company co-owner, was involved in a 2013 car accident that took the life of a woman and an unborn child. The Washington Post reported that, according to authorities, Mars had told a witness at the scene of the accident that she had fallen asleep while driving. The victims in the accident were identified as 86-year-old grandmother named Irene, who was sitting in the back seat, and the unborn child of Ashley Aker Blakesley, the driver of the Chrysler minivan struck by Mars' Porsche SUV. 5 other passengers were later treated at the hospital. At the time, Mars was the second richest woman in the US with a net worth of $20.5 billion. Her net worth currently sits at $30.2 billion. She pleaded guilty to a misdemeanor reckless driving charge, resulting in 6-month suspension of her driver's license and a $2,500 fine. The Aker family said they never wished for Mars to spend time behind bars for the accident. We have only forgiveness in our hearts for her, Sharon Aker, Ashley's mother, had said in a court statement. My husband and I would like to say thank you to Miss Mars for her kindness thus far and hope in time that she too will find peace. Number 10, Genghis Khan. Genghis Khan was around from 1206 to 1227, and he was one of the most fearsome conquerors of all time. And by the end of his life, the Mongol Empire occupied a vast empire from Central Asia to China. Much of the wealth came from plunders, taxes, and control of caravan routes along the Silk Road, and provided the Mongols with valuable revenue. He owned 270,000 horses and purchased stone diamonds worth $1 trillion, and gold deposits weighing in at a whopping 2 million tons, totaling $11 trillion alone. Number 9, Elon Musk. As of November 2021, Forbes has named Elon Musk the richest man in the world. Musk has a net worth of $281.6 billion as of late 2021. However, it's highly likely he has a lot more now. But it's suggested that he is the next trillionaire, If he did become one right now, he would be in a club of one person, considering there are no living trillionaires right now. Elon Musk's fortune is tied to Tesla and SpaceX. No doubt he also invests wisely in stocks, cryptocurrency, and such. How else could he keep building his wealth? Besides the sale of his Tesla vehicles and accessories and parts, there must be more for him to be able to amass such a fortune. Number 8. Zhao Zu. Zhao Zu was the 6th emperor of the Song dynasty in China. His original personal name was Zhao Zongzhen, but he changed it to Zhao Zu after his coronation. He reigned from 1067 until his passing in 1085. The enormous wealth came from technology, innovations, and efficient reform in collecting taxes. The Song dynasty was the first to use gunpowder and first to introduce paper money during the 11th century. The emperor supported the modern welfare state and the well-being of their citizens. When the emperor Shenzong did pass in 1085 at the age of 36 from an unspecified illness and was succeeded by his son, Zhao Zu. Number 7. Jeff Bezos. Before Elon Musk took the top spot for the richest man in the world, there was Jeff Bezos, who was slipped into second place in that category with about $201 billion. His wealth comes mostly from Amazon, which is probably the most popular and widely used retail online shop in the world. As with most wealthy people, Bezos likely makes smart investments in real estate and the stock market at least. It may not seem he has far to go to get back to first, but Elon Musk has certainly shown himself to be a fierce competitor. And with Elon recently buying Twitter, it's unlikely he will beat him out of that top spot. Number 6. Akbar the Great. The Indian emperor conquered hundreds of thousands of square miles of territory and ruled over much of the Indian subcontinent. Known as the Mongol Emperor from 1556 until 1605. He controlled around 25% of the world's GDP at the time, which would translate to a staggering $21 trillion today. The Mongols lived in a luxury rivaled only by the Bourbons of France, the Habsburg of Austria, the Romanovs of Russia, and the emperors of China. So impressed were the British by the wealth of the Mongols, the word Mongol entered the English language as a term to describe an all-powerful ruler of industry, films, or other endeavors. Compared to Elizabeth of England, the seat of power of the Mongol emperor was the peacock throne. It had in its background an image of a peacock with an expanded tail, decorated in gold and precious stones. The gold divan surmounted by bejeweled peacocks was a symbol of Mongol power and wealth. During Akbar's period, military innovations in cannons, fortifications, and the use of elephants were introduced. Number 5. Mansa Musa. Mansa Musa was the emperor and sultan of the Malian Empire, consisting of territory formerly belonging to the Ghana Empire in present-day southern Mauritania and in Mali and the immediate surrounding areas. His lands had vast gold deposits during his reign. Gold was in substantial demand, and Mali may have been the largest producer of gold in the world, bringing him immeasurable wealth. The story of Musa's gold pilgrimage has been told for ages. Musa embarked on a pilgrimage to Mecca between 1324 and 1325, taking with him 60,000 men, all wearing brocade and Parisian silk, 12,000 slaves, who each carried 1.8 kilograms or 4 pounds of gold bars, and heralds dressed in silks, who bore gold staffs, organized horses and handled bags, and 80 camels, which each carried 23 to 136 kilograms or 50 to 300 pounds of gold dust. Musa provided all necessities for the procession, feeding the entire company of men and animals. Musa gave the gold to the poor he met along his route. Musa not only gave to the cities he passed on the way to Mecca, including Cairo and Medina, but also traded gold for souvenirs. Musa's generous actions inadvertently devastated the economies of the regions through which he passed. In the cities of Cairo, Medina, and Mecca, the sudden influx of gold devalued the metal for the next decade. Prices on goods and wares greatly inflated. To rectify the gold market on his way back from Mecca, Musa borrowed all the gold he could carry from moneylenders in Cairo at high interest. This is the only time recorded in history that one man directly controlled the price of gold in the Mediterranean. News of the Malian emperor's city of wealth even traveled across the Mediterranean to southern Europe, where traders from Venice, Granada, and Genoa added Timbuktu to their maps to trade manufactured goods for gold. Timbuktu soon became a center of trade, culture, and Islam. Today, Musa's palace has since vanished. The university, Sankor, and mosque now still stand in Timbuktu today. Number 4. Amenhotep III. He was around from 1388 to 1351 BC, and during the 18th dynasty, Egypt was a global superpower both in military and trade. His reign was a period of unprecedented prosperity and artistic splendor, when Egypt reached the peak of its artistic and international power. Amenhotep was lucky. During his reign, there were no wars, and Egypt's weapon trade was at an all-time high. He kept all money inside the family, so when his mother, who controlled most of the wealth, wealth passed, he became head of the family. This gave him literally all land in Egypt, giving him a total wealth of $4 to $6 trillion. Number 3, King Solomon. King Solomon's riches came from taxation, trade, and tributes, and was around from 970 to 931 BCE. According to the Bible, King Solomon during his rule is said to have received 25 tons of gold for each of the 39 years of his reign. In a single year, according to 1 Kings 10:14, Solomon collected tribute accounting to 666 talents, which is 18,125 kilograms of gold. Solomon is described as surrounding himself with all the luxuries and the grandeur of an Eastern monarch, and his government prospered. The Hebrew Bible credits him as the builder of the first temple in Jerusalem, using the vast wealth he and his father had accumulated. He dedicated King Solomon's temple to Yahweh, the God of Israel. Number 2, Bill Gates. Bill Gates is a big name across the globe as the founder of Microsoft and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. His net worth comes in at around $137.9 billion, which is a far cry from being a trillionaire. Currently, Gates is undergoing some potentially negative press related to his divorce from Melinda Gates. That said, together their post-divorce donations have gone over $3 billion in the first quarter of 2022, so maybe he's next in line to be a trillionaire. And if you're wondering why no trillionaires are alive today, it's probably because of inflation. Also, a little fun fact, cause why not? A trillionaire could give every person on Earth $140. Number 1, Augustus Caesar. The Roman Emperor was around from 63 BC to 14 AD, and controlled vast stretches of land throughout the Roman Empire, controlling many states. His personal fortune was equivalent to 20% of the entire empire's economy. Caesar's wealth peaked when he owned Egypt as part of his personal private property. During his period, Egypt contributed 25 to 30% of GDP and had some of the best agricultural land.